Hello, police? A crowd of people are walking down the street, and they're holding a banner with someone's portrait, and something is written in the foreign language. Yes, please send someone quickly. A message like this was received by the police of the Ukrainian city of Chernivtsi on a summer evening in 1971. The police immediately went to the indicated place and also notified the KGB. Something illegal was definitely happening there. No official demonstrations were planned on that day, and unofficial ones were banned in the USSR. Moreover, there were some inscriptions in a foreign language. Police cars blocked the street. All the residents ran out to see what had happened. There was such a noise, like a group of terrorists was being captured, one of the participants later recalled. Police detained 16 participants of the unknown act and took them to the police department. All of them turned out to be locals between 16 and 19 years old, mostly school children and students. One of them did carry a portrait glued to a sheet of plywood attached to a stick. The policeman who seized him hardly knew that the person depicted on the portrait was
Can't buy me love, love can't buy.
Yes, it was Paul McCartney. The detainees explained that today, on June 18, was the birthday of the Beatles member. They all adored the music of the British Quartet and decided to celebrate the day with such spontaneous action. Two participants in the procession took a poster with the portrait of Paul cut from West German magazine Bravo and put up as a banner. Something similar, but with portraits of communist leaders, was used in traditional festive demonstrations during the Soviet government holidays. One girl wrote on the portrait the title of the Beatles song, I'm Down. We already have released an episode about how the Soviet leaders consider Western music not just regular popular songs, but an ideological weapon of the enemy. Tap the link somewhere here and you will find out that the Soviet government blamed, I don't exaggerate, Scorpions for violence and Julio Iglesias for neo-fascism. And the Beatles, of course, were one of the most dangerous modifications of this ideological weapon. Sure, young people began to love Lennon more than Lenin. Therefore, the LP records of the Fab Four were not released in the USSR until 1986, and the propaganda portrayed them as an example of the mediocrity which can achieve success in the capitalist world. For example, the famous Soviet composer Nikita Bogoslovsky wrote an article in 1964 in which he called the group "Darn Beatles" and declared with confidence, "Poor naive Beatles, you probably strongly believe that all this fame, big money, roars and squeals of fans, visits to kings, all this is forever and deserved. But I bet you'll hold out for another year and a half, and then young people with even more wild hairstyles and wild voices come, and it will be over. And you will have great difficulties finding your place in small provincial taverns for temporary work." The questioning of the young people continued throughout the night. KGB officers also took part in the interrogation. They were supposed to monitor youth movements and subcultures in the USSR. First of all, the KGB was concerned that these guys and girls identified themselves as hippies. This was considered a far more serious threat to the socialist system than just their love for the Beatles. Recently, in 2020, a local media in Chernivtsi published an interview with Anatoly Hluhovsky, one of the guys detained that evening. He recalls, "In 1979, a hippie convention was to take place in Copenhagen. We were asked, which one of you was supposed to go to this convention? Just imagine those times in Copenhagen. These adults, their incredible questions astonished me, and they tried to incite us against each other. I was told, why did you contact the Jews? They induced you. They're responsible for your troubles. Indeed, There were quite a few Jews in our company, as in the whole city at that time. In our defense, we say that the Constitution of the USSR guaranteed freedom of demonstration, but we were told that this is not the case. It turned out that the freedom only for the May Day and the October demonstrations was guaranteed. It turned out that an even larger action was planned for July the 7th, Ringo Starr's birthday, but the KGB convinced the Beatles fans not to do it. The most active initiators of the celebration of Paul McCartney's birthday were brought to trial. 7 people were sentenced to 15 days of arrest for disturbing public order. In addition, 6 people were expelled from universities and the Young Communist League, aka the Komsomol. The latter almost guaranteed they lost all chances for a successful career. Secondary school graduates were allowed to complete the school year, but they received unsatisfactory grades and behavior, and were therefore forced to study in their senior year again to obtain their secondary school certificates. The children's parents, principals of schools where the demonstrators studied, and the secretary of the city committee of the Komsomol all got severe reprimands for insufficient educational work. The previously mentioned Anatoly Gluchovsky, who spent 15 days in the cell and was expelled from the Komsomol and the university, today believes that the punishment was rather mild and everything could be much worse. A report on the punishment for the march was shown on television in Crime News. A local newspaper published an article which dishonored Anatoly Gluchovsky and his parents. A quite typical Soviet style of this piece deserves special attention. The author tells in detail how badly Anatoly's parents brought up their son, indulging all his desires. He wore long hair, fell in love with Western music, and eventually ended up in the police station. And the journalist did not write a single word about what kind of terrible crime Gluchovsky had committed. In addition, the author began his article by recalling a trial of another young man from a good family who stabbed someone with a knife, and drew a parallel between these two stories. Anatoly Gluchovsky recalls in an interview, "My acquaintances met me and asked, 'Listen, we don't understand. Have you killed someone?' They write about you in such a way like there is no doubt about it." This episode was created on the basis of an article of Chernivtsi media Shpalta and a message from the KGB to the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Ukraine. The latter document was found in archive by the historian Volodymyr Birchak. The links to both sources are in the description, as well as the link to our Patreon. Feel free to support us if you like the video, and thanks to all our current Patreons who made it possible. Don't forget to press the like button and to subscribe to our channel. See you in our next episode. Bye!